Hello everyone and anyone unfortunate enough to have stumbled onto this video in a drug-induced haze or perhaps morbid curiosity. I am Frilicly, and in this video I'll be giving my thoughts on a game that made it very difficult for me to snack on my honey smacks. That game, as the title of this video explicitly states, is Scorn. So sit back and let's get scorny, which you might think is a word that is wholly inappropriate for a game whose aesthetics are purposely grotesque and macabre, but no, not really. What happens when you combine scary and horny? You get scorny. Anyway, going into the game, I didn't know much about it. With Halloween just around the corner, I just wanted to give something real spooky like a try. As soon as I saw the images for Scorn, which is typically how I pick a game, also my car insurance, I was sufficiently intrigued to give it a shot. And because I was purposely looking for a game that made me feel depressed while simultaneously trying to get under my skin, I can say I made the right call going with this one instead of logging back into Hello Kitty Island Adventure, which is a scary thought in and of itself. Those days are long behind me, and I will not be returning to that hell. Also, I should probably check my insurance, my car insurance. Hmm. Now, back to Scorn. First, puzzle solving games. So I should state this. So I should be upfront about this. Puzzle solving games are not my favorite. So I think it's fair to say that this game had an uphill battle trying to get me to like it. It is not that I dislike puzzle games, it's simply that they have to be pretty darn good to get me invested. So it is fair to say that my bias was working against this game as I played it and from the very beginning. Nevertheless, I did play through it all and I did find some positives and some negatives. I'll go ahead and acknowledge everything the game does well. The first is the imagery, theme, atmosphere, tone, essentially everything that goes into how the game looks, sounds, and feels. The game presents an unrelenting, bleak, mechanical darkness that is disturbing to see. Sure, but inviting enough so that I was enticed to keep pushing forward. As I moved forward, I was consistently worried about what was coming up next, but I was also interested in seeing what was next. What grotesque imagery or harrowing action was I going to be confronted with, and what was going to be demanded of me to get through it? Were questions that consistently ran through my mind as I made my way through the game. Generally, most of what was demanded was pretty straightforward or designed well enough so that I was able to intuitively figure out what I had to do to get through a given obstacle, challenge, or combat situation. However, there were a few instances that were where I was completely at a loss about what to do next. And the game doesn't throw much of any lifelines to get you moving in the right direction if the initial contextual clues are not enough. Obviously, enough for you to figure out what it is that you have to do next. Obviously, you can go online and look at playthroughs or read a walkthrough when you get stuck, but I'm not a fan of using outside resources to complete a game unless I am completely at wit's end. And even then, it's not something that I would want to do. It's just something that I'm forced to do, which never did happen in this game. So that is a plus in my book, but a little more on this later. Onto the lesson stellar. Many of the tasks, obstacles, challenges, whatever the exact term might be, felt as if I was just trying to set off or fix a Rube Goldberg machine. What I mean is that I felt as if I had to move through a series of roundabout steps to get something like, say, an elevator working. I mean, it is a way to maximize the amount of time doing, well, not very much, which takes me to a bigger issue I have with the game, and that's the moments that just fell flat. While exploring this dark and macabre world can be entertaining in and of itself, it can also become tiresome rather quickly. Admittedly, if I immediately knew every step I had to take to get through a level, then it wouldn't be much of an issue. It would also be an exceptionally short game, which would really work against this game. But after walking through the same areas trying to figure out if I missed something or if I didn't pull the right lever or if I forgot to push one button, the environments just become tiresome because there really isn't much else to do other than to get the Rube Goldberg machine working again so that you can move on to the next series of steps to take to move on to the next series of steps. And that's as exciting as it sounds. Some say that it's the experience that the game offers that makes it worth the time spent, and in some cases that very well might be the case. In some games it really doesn't matter how much time you spend going back and forth because you're really just enjoying the game world, mechanics, gameplay, whatever it might be. In Scorn, at least for me, that wasn't the case. The game world is fascinating, some levels are visually amazing, sure, but the gameplay just wasn't there for me. Aside from pulling levers, turning wheels, and making sure that I push the right knob, there is a very clunky or better yet just lackluster combat system that you can avoid using altogether if you patiently wait for dangers to pass. This holds true for all but one level where you're forced to fight a baby in a robot thing type machine. I'm not. It's some kind of baby controlling a robot. I'm not even sure if it was a baby. It was probably just a little monster thing. Okay, well, while I'm not a fan of just waiting around for the danger to pass, it is preferable to actually having to use the weapons provided. One, because you're giving a limited amount of ammunition that you have to be very judicious with, but also because it's kind of a pain to aim and shoot and wait for the reload. So it's just better to let the creatures pass you and just move on and try to avoid them. If the goal was to make me feel vulnerable and combat averse, then that was definitely accomplished. Alright, I have to do it. I have to talk about the ending. I won't detail the conclusion. It suffices to say that if you play or have played this game already and made it to the end without already knowing what the end was, then the ending of this game will stick out to you. Some might find it to be a stroke of commentary brilliance on this or that, others simply a very underwhelming conclusion. I for one find it to be a bit of both. The game carries its bleak, dark, and nihilistic tone throughout, and the ending is no different. I have to admit that I was hoping for a different kind of ending, and more than once I did convince myself to push through the game just to see the end, and when I did reach the end, my initial reaction was to ask if that was it. And yeah, that's it. Without revealing much, what that is an underwhelming ending. However, having reflecting on it a bit more, if nothing else, it certainly did leave a strong impression and had me wondering what it all meant. That does not mean that I liked it nor find it satisfying, but I will say if the goal of it was to leave the player befuddled, exasperated, and depressed by the time they reach the end, another mission accomplished. Hooray for the developers. It might sound like I didn't enjoy the game, but that's not exactly it. I don't imagine that that the developers of this kind of game go for the same kind of enjoyability that you would get from something like God of War, Doom, or hell, even something like Metal Slug. Because the theme, tone, atmosphere, and everything that goes into making this game the grim, macabre, depressing experience that it is, don't lend themselves to that kind of enjoyability. But that doesn't necessarily excuse the moments where it was just dull, where the game's shortcomings really presented themselves. I don't know what to do at some part of the game. Well, tough luck. Let the players figure it out. It seems to be what the developers were going for. Yes, as I said before, you could go online, find a guide, find the walkthrough, whatever it might be, but that's external to the game experience and not something I find to be a net positive for any game. And then if you did go online and found your walkthrough and breezed through the levels, you'd be left with an exceptionally short game because as I stated before, there's not much else to do. If you got through the level, you get through the game, and you're done within a matter of a few hours. I won't be exact about it, but it really wouldn't take that long. It is also worth mentioning that throughout the game I was simply confused about what was going on. It seems that this might have been intentional on the developer's end, and after seeing the end, I believe it was. Unfortunately, I can't say that I found it all that endearing. I would gladly have traded the sense of mystery and disorientation that it brought about for a little more explicit and less subtle hinting at what was going on. That would have at least added to my motivation to keep moving forward, other than simply wanting to see a different location or just advancing the game so I could get on with it. Alright, well, that just about does it for this video. Placing a numerical score on it places the game at a 2.8 probably shaky 3 out of 5, somewhere in between there. It can be essentially it can be summed up as saying it's fine, I guess. The game in all its macabre, disturbing, and unsettling aesthetic looks great, and there is, which I didn't even bother mentioning, I ran into no technical problems. There was no bugs, glitches, at least none that I can find. Considering that I was looking for a horror inducing game, this game did sort of accomplish that. However, it really didn't do much else. It wasn't all that entertaining, and the moments of aimless wandering really did take away from the experience. There wasn't all that many places to go wandering about, mind you, so it didn't take that long to eventually figure out what to do next. But that leads me to my main complaint, that there really is only one thing to do in this game, and that's get through the Rube Goldberg like levels. In the end, all this adds up to a rather muted horror experience that, even with my aimless wandering, wasn't very long at all. To me, that's fine because because the game didn't offer all that much for me to begin with. Well, anyway, that's it for me. Till next time.